Hello! This week I want to talk about organization, specifically organization of knitting needles. Keeping my yarn stash organized is usually pretty easy. I just color code it, I can see it through the glass in my cupboards, and if I lose the labels, I just make my own out of cardstock and just attach that to the ball. And it's easy. Pretty soon after I started knitting, I made myself a knitting needle roll. I used to use a lot of secondhand needles that I picked up from my local op shop, and I would knit from a lot of vintage patterns. So this needle, this sort of canvas roll, calico, we're just gonna call it calico. This calico roll was really helpful because I just wrote in pencil any conversion that I needed between millimeter needles and the vintage size, and could just keep them all safe and tucked away. Nowadays, I don't knit from as many vintage patterns, and if I do, I'll just look up the conversion of the knitting needles. My collection has also grown a lot. I now have a set of interchangeable knitting needles, which honestly I grab for way more often than any other knitting needle. I do also sometimes use double pointed needles, but clearly I have a lot of straight knitting needles that I don't use. I might knit swatches for patterns on straight needles, but I mostly just use them to store projects that I'm not currently working on, because I am a goblin knitter and I like to cast on projects on a whim. This leads me to the first step in any organization, and that is getting rid of the things that you no longer need. So let's check out what we've got. This is my current knitting needle roll. So you can see where I just drew on it in pencil. It's crammed with needles that aren't even necessarily in the right spots. Like, those I think are 5s. Oh, God, that's hard. What you don't see is these. Whatever those are. This. Here's the other one of those. And then I've still got these in packets. That's it. This. I have one of these, which is, it tells you what size the knitting needles are. So 4mm needles will slit into the 4mm slot. What I did for most of them was I took some nail polish. I made little marks next to the size that was on the size that they were, and then marked them around the band. So I know that these ones are the 3.75mm circular needles. It was super duper handy. It means that I don't have to check these every time and sort of be like, I'm pretty sure that's the right size. But now I use these bad boys, which these came in a plastic container that basically looked like this. Let's just start sorting the needles. I originally made this case by taking a long piece of fabric and folding the ends into pockets long enough to keep the needles in, and then stitching channels for each size. To give it some rigidity, I stitched cotton herringbone tape to the edges. I ended up getting rid of enough needles that I didn't need a new case, so I just worked out where the new needles would be placed in the old case. And then I opted to dye it to give it a little bit more interest. As an upgrade from the pencil marks that were originally on the case, I opted to mark out the needle size in erasable ink and then embroider it on in a contrasting color. Done! I love the roll. I mean, this ended up being sort of reorganize my knitting needles into the same case with me and get rid of a bunch of knitting needles. I ended up getting rid of all of my circular knitting needles just because I don't use them, like the fixed ones. I don't use them. I held on to some of the smaller ones, but aside from that, I just got rid of them because I don't need them and someone else can make use of them. Yeah, I ended up getting rid of way more knitting needles than I thought, which is why I didn't end up making a new case because they all ended up fitting in this case. So I just decided to kind of zhuzh it up a little bit and dye over it so it's all sort of this nice tonal, almost tie-dye effect, which I really like and matches with my project bag, so that's really fun. The base thing is pretty easy to make. It's just sort of folding fabric into as many pockets as you need and then stitching channels based on what knitting needles you have and what size they are. In terms of this, I just tie it on to the loop that I put around it before I do the bow. I just string it on there because it's got the little thing. And then I've got my counter close to hand as well. That makes it easy if I know that I'm going to be knitting something and working out what swatch gauge it should be and all that kind of stuff. I've got it all in one bundle that I can grab. Or a few if I grab my interchangeable bundle as well. If you liked this video, feel free to check out my other videos. And if you really like this video, feel free to subscribe. I hope you have a lovely week. Bye!